There's been a lot of discussion about this professor that got fired at NYU for giving too tough material in chemistry, right? So that was the sort of basics of this. And there's a lot to the conversation that is not being told, and it makes me extremely uncomfortable in a lot of different ways in terms of the conversation that's happening. On the sort of faculty side or professor side, that it's being depicted that the professor, is doing his job, and B, on the opposite side, is being pushed around from students, and they're able to. So students signed a petition and got the faculty fired for a difficult course. Um, I find all of this rather uncomfortable in a lot of different ways, a lot of sort of elements of this in terms of it played out. And I think we might need to revisit some of it. So, first of all, if you were going through this, right, and this is a similar circumstance in terms of how you deal with human resources, you don't fire people. That that's not what you do. What you need to do is think about how you can train and help people and guide them. And so if you're not willing to invest when they're not performing the way that you would like to do, right, which is what they should have done, is sat the faculty down and had a conversation and said, hey, you know what, we'd be willing to help you coach this. Maybe we can get you some TAs, all sorts of different elements like that. Then, perhaps if they weren't willing to do that, then they're not functioning the way that they should be as an organization. Um, in the real world, this happens a lot, right? Like organizations fire people for all sorts of different reasons if they sort of interact the wrong way with a client. But what we have to remember is there is a lot that goes on in terms of the output of what we're trying to do. First of all, it's a complicated process, and the output that you get is 5 or 10 years down the road in terms of understanding, right? And we can't sort of let it's what's called an endogenous process. If you start letting people sort of assess along the way in terms of where they should sit, we're going to get a lot of endogeneity that happens, and that's just really, really problematic in terms of you know, uh, grades and all those kind of things. So, notwithstanding that, the sort of problematic aspects of but the other component of it is really on the onus of on the university. It's not the students that are to blame, right? So the students themselves are going to push back, but the university should step up and provide counseling, coaching, all sorts of different elements. The last possible thing that you should be doing is to be terminating somebody. Now, um, perhaps, and this is perhaps maybe what the real story is that this certain faculty member was somewhat problematic in the past to various different degrees, and they were really struggling with coaching this faculty member. Um, and perhaps that is more along the lines of what happened underlying what's going on is that this one faculty member is being very difficult. I don't know, but I'm trying to sort of look at the scenario objectively. Now, I do also know that universities are terrible with human resources, right? The sort of state of the art in sort of managing human beings is not great in most university systems. They sort of do a really poor job of this. It's kind of interesting because I teach about this kind of stuff, and university systems are really poor at this for a lot of different reasons. It's a difficult area to sort of measure human performance and things like that. But um, what we need to think about, rather than this particular individual, we sort of have to judge the system as a whole as being problematic. And we need to have systematic changes that are involved, right? So the default should be for universities is to look at this and learn from the scenario of what not to do, A, from the student side, It doesn't look great for the students, right? And then B, in terms of managing a crisis, and this is essentially what's going on is a pretty big crisis that they're dealing with. And they need to take a step back and say, you know what, we admit it. This is our problem. We have to deal with this. We're not doing an adequate job of doing management. We need to step up and we need to make some changes with how we manage this. This is the messaging that should come out of all of this scenario, is that the organization admits that there is a problem that's going on and they figure out a way to deal with it. Now, legally, this is a very difficult sort of thing to deal with, opens them up to lawsuits and things like that in various different ways. But they might want to sit with having a conversation with an arbiter and walk through this crisis with a particular faculty member of thinking through how to deal with this. And then on top of it, thinking about how do you address this issue going forward so we don't have to deal with this, and really going through the systematic steps of getting there. Remember, there's a lot that goes on in a university system that's really complicated in many different ways, but they could do a better job of assessing the circumstance, right? My belief is that lawyers were involved and they probably recommended what to do. That generally, whenever something like this happens, there is lawyers involved and they sort of provide recommendation. But sometimes you need to sort of think about, what is the long-term benefit, and sort of think about this is like, how are we going to deal with a certain situation, and you know take a step back. So if you're involved in universities, right, and you're in management, sort of take a step back and think about how do we manage this so that all parties feel accepted or acknowledged in some sort of way and understand what they're doing. So perhaps providing compensation to the faculty member is not necessarily going to work out, but maybe providing some sort of coaching or additional resources to help them through, just making them feel acknowledged, being part of an organization, but then think about ways how they could sort of phase out eventually this particular individual in a humane way that could help them, and not phase them out in the sense of like, we don't want you to belong, but thinking about like, how do we find a spot for you so that you fit within our organization and we can be helpful for you to the best of our ability. I think that should be an important thing to think about. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. All right, bye.